The morning fog hung thick over Windsor Castle as Meghan Markle stared out the window of her California home, thousands of miles away from the ancient stones that once promised her a fairy tale life. The phone call from her legal advisor had just ended, leaving behind words that would reshape everything. She thought she knew about royal protocol and inheritance law. Sources close to the Duchess of Sussex revealed that Meghan had been quietly consulting with top legal minds across both sides of the Atlantic. The question wasn't simple curiosity about royal traditions. Instead, it centered on something far more concrete and potentially explosive. What rights, if any, did Archie and Lilibet possess to the vast wealth accumulated by the British royal family over centuries? The rumors first surfaced in exclusive circles, whispered among those who moved in both Hollywood and aristocratic British society. Meghan, they said, had grown increasingly frustrated with the limitations placed on her children's future within the royal framework. While Harry had stepped back from royal duties, their children remained in the line of succession, albeit far down the list. But succession to the throne was only one aspect of royal inheritance. Palace insiders, speaking on condition of anonymity, described a series of tense conversations that had taken place over the past months. These weren't the public disagreements that had dominated headlines during Meghan and Harry's exit from royal duties. These were private, calculated discussions about trusts, estates, and the complex web of wealth that supports the British monarchy. The catalyst appeared to be a discovery Meghan made while researching her children's heritage rights. Royal finances, while often shrouded in tradition and secrecy, operated under specific legal frameworks. The sovereign grant, private estates like Balmoral and Sandringham, and centuries-old trusts created a complicated picture of what belonged to the crown, what belonged to the Windsor family personally, and what rights extended to all descendants. Legal experts familiar with royal matters explained that the situation was unprecedented in modern times. Never before had senior royals completely stepped away from official duties while maintaining their children's place in the succession line. The legal implications created gray areas that both sides seemed unprepared to navigate. Meghan's team had reportedly identified several historical precedents where royal descendants, even those living abroad or outside official royal duties, maintained certain inheritance rights. These cases, dating back generations, suggested that geographic location and active royal participation might not automatically disqualify future claims to family wealth. The timing of these legal inquiries coincided with growing speculation about Meghan's long-term strategy. Friends described a woman who had never fully accepted the constraints placed upon her during her brief time as a working royal. The idea that her children might face similar limitations, particularly regarding their financial inheritance, appeared to have triggered a new phase of careful planning. California's legal environment provided Meghan with advantages unavailable in the British system. American courts operated under different principles regarding inheritance disputes, and the international nature of royal wealth created opportunities for legal challenges that might not exist within purely British jurisdiction. Behind closed doors, royal advisors were said to be monitoring the situation carefully. The possibility of public legal challenges to royal inheritance practices represented a new type of threat. Unlike the media battles that had characterized previous royal disputes, legal action could force unprecedented transparency about royal finances. The research Meghan's team conducted revealed layers of complexity within royal wealth management. Some assets clearly belonged to the crown and would never be subject to family inheritance disputes. Others, however, represented personal family wealth accumulated over generations, creating potential grounds for inheritance claims by any legitimate royal descendants. As autumn approached, those close to Meghan described a woman who had found her footing after years of public scrutiny and private struggle. The legal research wasn't driven by desperation or revenge, they insisted, but by a calculated understanding that her children's futures might require different strategies than traditional royal paths provided. The implications extended beyond financial considerations. Successfully establishing inheritance rights for Archie and Lilibet could create precedents affecting other royal descendants who chose lives outside official royal duties. The modern monarchy's efforts to streamline and reduce the number of working royals might face unexpected legal challenges if inheritance rights remain broadly distributed. Among all royal descendants, international legal observers noted that such a case would likely involve multiple jurisdictions, complex trusts, and centuries of legal precedent. The outcome could reshape understanding of royal inheritance, family wealth distribution, and the legal relationship between personal royal assets and crown property. Meanwhile, Meghan continued her public commitments in California, giving no outward sign of the legal wheels turning behind the scenes. Her focus remained on building her media ventures, supporting charitable causes, and raising her children with an understanding of their unique heritage and the opportunities that heritage might provide. The secure conference room in downtown Los Angeles buzzed with quiet intensity as Meghan's legal team assembled documents that would form the foundation of their unprecedented research. 3 months had passed since the initial inquiry, and what had begun as simple questions about royal inheritance had evolved into something far more comprehensive and potentially groundbreaking. David Chun, a specialist in international inheritance law, spread thick folders across the mahogany table. His research had uncovered a maze of royal trusts, some dating back to Queen Victoria's reign, that had never been tested against modern legal standards. The documents revealed a complex system where royal wealth existed in multiple categories, each with different rules about who could access what. And when Meghan sat at the head of the table, her demeanor calm but focused. Gone was any trace of the uncertainty that had marked her early royal days. In its place was a woman who had learned to navigate complex systems and wasn't intimidated by tradition when it conflicted with her children's interests. She listened intently as Chun explained the most promising avenues for legal action. The breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. Historical records from the 1930s, discovered in archived legal documents, showed how King Edward VIII's abdication had been handled regarding inheritance rights. Despite giving up the throne and leaving England, Edward had retained certain financial rights through family trusts. More importantly, these rights had been structured to pass to any children he might have had. This precedent suggested that stepping back from royal duties didn't automatically eliminate inheritance rights, particularly to family wealth that existed separately from crown assets. Meghan's legal team had identified at least 7 distinct trusts and estates where similar principles might apply to her children. The financial stakes were enormous. Conservative estimates suggested that personal royal family wealth, separate from crown assets, exceeded £2 billion. This included private properties, investment portfolios, art collections, and historic jewelry that had been accumulated over generations through personal inheritance rather than state funding. Rebecca Martinez, a family law specialist with experience in high-net-worth international cases, outlined the strategic approach they were developing. Rather than immediately filing legal challenges, they would first seek clarification through formal channels. This approach would force the royal family to either acknowledge the children's inheritance rights or publicly explain why such rights didn't exist. The California legal system offered unique advantages for this type of international inheritance dispute. American courts had previously ruled on cases involving foreign trusts and inherited wealth, often favoring broad interpretations of beneficiary rights. Additionally, any royal family wealth invested in American markets could potentially be subject to American legal jurisdiction. Meghan's research had also revealed disturbing patterns in how royal inheritance rights had been historically managed. Several instances showed where family members who fell out of favor had quietly been excluded from inheritances that should have been theirs by right. These exclusions had gone unchallenged because the affected parties lacked resources or legal knowledge to fight back. The parallels to her own situation were unmistakable. The public nature of her conflicts with certain royal family members could potentially be used to justify excluding her children from rightful inheritances. By establishing legal precedents now, while her children were young, Meghan could protect their future interests. Regardless of how family relationships evolved, international media attention would be inevitable once legal action began. But Meghan's team had developed strategies to control the narrative. Rather than allowing the story to become another chapter in tabloid coverage of royal family drama, they planned to frame it as a legitimate legal matter, involving children's inheritance rights and international law. Prince Harry's role in these discussions remained carefully managed. While supportive of protecting his children's interests, Harry understood the delicate balance required. His ongoing relationship with his family, however strained, needed to be preserved for his children's sake. The legal strategy focused on institutional rather than personal challenges, targeting systems rather than individuals. Behind the scenes, preliminary communications had already begun with royal legal representatives. These weren't formal demands or threats, but rather professional inquiries about inheritance documentation and trust structures. The responses had been telling in their evasiveness, suggesting that royal advisors were unprepared for systematic legal challenges to inheritance practices. The research had also uncovered international precedents that could strengthen any future legal challenges. European courts had increasingly ruled in favor of inheritance rights for all legitimate descendants, regardless of their relationship with family institutions. These rulings could provide powerful supporting arguments for American legal action. Meghan's team had identified 3 specific trusts where the children's rights appeared strongest. These trusts had been established with broad language about all legitimate descendants without specific exclusions for those living abroad or outside royal duties. Challenging these trusts could establish precedents affecting the entire system of royal inheritance. As the meeting concluded, Meghan reviewed the timeline her legal team had proposed. The next phase would involve formal documentation requests and preliminary legal filings designed to establish standing for future challenges. The process would be measured and methodical, building toward comprehensive legal action that could reshape royal inheritance for generations. The implications extended far beyond financial considerations. Success could establish new standards for how modern royal families balanced traditional inheritance practices with contemporary legal principles. For Meghan's children, it could mean the difference between relying solely on their parents' success and having access to their full heritage as royal descendants. The sealed envelope arrived at Buckingham Palace on a crisp Tuesday morning, carried by a courier from one of London's most prestigious law firms. Inside was a formal letter that would send shockwaves through the highest levels of royal administration. Meghan Markle's legal representatives were officially requesting detailed documentation about inheritance trusts and financial arrangements affecting her children. Sir Geoffrey Whitmore, the Queen Consort's private secretary, read the letter twice before reaching for his secure phone. The document was professionally worded and legally precise, but its implications were staggering. For the first time in modern royal history, an American legal team was systematically challenging the opaque world of royal inheritance practices. The letter outlined specific requests for information about 7 distinct trusts and estates. It referenced historical precedents, international inheritance law, and requested detailed accounting of assets that had never been subject to external scrutiny. Most concerning was the letter's tone, which suggested this was merely the first step in a larger legal strategy. Within hours, emergency meetings were being scheduled across royal households. The situation required coordination between multiple legal teams, financial advisors, and communication specialists. The potential for public legal proceedings about royal wealth created unprecedented challenges for an institution built on tradition and discretion. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, Meghan was experiencing the calm before what she knew would be an enormous storm. The legal letter had been sent after months of careful preparation, but she understood that formal action would fundamentally change her relationship with the royal family. There would be no going back to private negotiations or family discussions once legal proceedings began. Her decision hadn't been made lightly. Months of research had convinced her that traditional approaches would never secure her children's rightful inheritance. The royal family's response to informal inquiries had been politely evasive, suggesting they hoped the matter would simply disappear if ignored long enough. Prince Harry found himself in an impossible position as news of the legal action reached him. His loyalty to his children's interests aligned with Meghan's strategy, but his emotional ties to his family created painful conflicts. Private phone calls with his father and brother had become increasingly strained as the legal situation developed. The royal family's initial response revealed the depth of their unpreparedness for this type of challenge. Centuries of tradition had created systems that operated without external oversight or challenge. Modern legal standards, particularly American legal standards, threatened to expose practices that had never been subjected to contemporary scrutiny. Royal financial advisors scrambled to assess the vulnerability of various inheritance structures. Some trusts had been established with language so broad that excluding any legitimate royal descendants could be legally problematic. Others contained specific provisions that might protect them from external challenges. But testing these provisions in international courts created unknown risks. The timing of Meghan's legal action was strategically calculated. Recent changes in international inheritance law, particularly regarding trusts and offshore assets, had created new opportunities for challenging traditional exclusions. American courts had become increasingly willing to assert jurisdiction over international inheritance. Disputes involving American citizens or residents, public relations experts within royal households began developing strategies for managing the inevitable media attention. The challenge was to avoid appearing defensive while protecting centuries of established practice. Any public statements about the legal challenge would require careful balance between respecting legal processes and maintaining royal dignity. Legal experts outside the royal sphere began analyzing the potential implications of Meghan's strategy. If successful, her approach could establish precedents, affecting inheritance rights for other royal descendants who had chosen non-traditional paths. The modern monarchy's efforts to streamline could face unexpected legal obstacles if inheritance rights remained broadly distributed. International media coverage began intensifying as news of the legal action leaked through various channels. Royal correspondents who had covered Meghan's previous conflicts with the institution found themselves reporting on something far more complex and potentially consequential than traditional family drama. The financial markets began showing subtle reactions to uncertainty about royal wealth and its management. While the monarchy's constitutional role remained secure, questions about personal royal assets and their legal status created new variables for institutions and individuals with financial connections to royal estates behind closed doors. Preliminary settlement discussions began almost immediately. Royal advisors understood that public legal proceedings would be damaging regardless of their outcome. The preferred approach involved private negotiations that could address Meghan's concerns while preserving institutional secrecy about royal finances. However, Meghan's legal team had anticipated settlement overtures and prepared responses that maintained pressure for full disclosure. They understood that private agreements without legal precedents could be easily overturned or ignored in the future. Their strategy required establishing binding legal principles that would protect the children's rights permanently. The complexity of international inheritance law became apparent as both sides assembled their legal teams. Multiple jurisdictions would potentially be involved, each with different standards and procedures. The case would likely require coordination between British, American, and potentially European legal systems. As winter approached, the formal legal challenge had transformed from rumor to reality. Court filings in California had begun the process that could ultimately reshape how royal inheritance operated in the modern world. The outcome would affect not only Meghan's children, but potentially every royal descendant, choosing paths outside traditional royal duties. For Meghan, the legal challenge represented more than financial considerations. It was about ensuring her children could access their full heritage as royal descendants, while living lives of their own choosing. The precedents established through this case would affect royal families for generations to come. The atmosphere in the Los Angeles courtroom was electric with anticipation as preliminary hearings began for what legal experts were already calling the most significant royal inheritance case in modern history. Media outlets from around the world had assembled outside. While inside, Meghan Markle sat with her legal team, projecting calm confidence despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. Judge Patricia Hernandez had been assigned to oversee the initial proceedings, bringing decades of experience with complex international inheritance disputes. Her reputation for thorough legal analysis and fair treatment of high-profile cases had made her assignment welcome news for Meghan's legal team, who knew they would need every advantage in the challenging months ahead. The royal family's response had evolved from initial shock to sophisticated legal counteraction. They had assembled a formidable team of international lawyers, led by Sir James Morrison, whose expertise in protecting institutional assets from legal challenges was legendary. His opening statements would set the tone for what promised to be a protracted legal battle. Morrison's strategy became clear during his first courtroom appearance. Rather than disputing the children's royal heritage, he argued that American courts lacked jurisdiction over British royal inheritance matters. This approach aimed to move the entire case to British courts, where royal legal protections would be far stronger and precedents heavily favored. Institutional control, Meghan's lead attorney, David Chun, had anticipated this jurisdictional challenge and prepared comprehensive counterarguments. He presented evidence that significant royal assets were held in American financial institutions and investment vehicles, establishing clear grounds for American legal jurisdiction. Additionally, the children's American citizenship created legal standing that couldn't be easily dismissed. The first major breakthrough came when Chun successfully argued for discovery proceedings that would require the royal family to produce detailed documentation about inheritance trusts and asset holdings. This ruling represented a stunning victory, as it would force unprecedented transparency about royal finances that had remained private for centuries. Royal legal teams immediately filed appeals, seeking to block the discovery proceedings. But the damage to their strategy was already apparent. The mere prospect of detailed financial disclosure created pressure for settlement, negotiations that hadn't existed during preliminary discussions. Meanwhile, the international legal community watched with fascination as centuries of royal legal protections faced their first systematic challenge under modern inheritance law. Law schools began incorporating the case into their curricula, recognizing its potential to establish new precedents for international inheritance disputes. The discovery process revealed layers of complexity within royal financial management that surprised even experienced legal observers. Royal wealth existed in multiple categories with different legal protections and inheritance rules for each category. Some assets were clearly protected as crown property, while others occupied gray areas where inheritance rights remained unclear. Meghan's legal team had uncovered evidence suggesting that previous inheritance exclusions had been implemented through administrative pressure rather than legal authority. In several historical cases, royal descendants had been persuaded to waive inheritance rights without fully understanding their legal position or the value of what they were giving up. The psychological pressure on all parties intensified as media coverage continued. Royal family members found themselves under scrutiny about financial matters that had never been public topics. Every public appearance was analyzed for signs of stress or confidence. Regarding the ongoing legal proceedings, for Prince Harry, the situation had become increasingly isolating. His support for his children's legal rights had created new tensions with family members who viewed the legal challenge as a fundamental attack on royal institutions. Private communications with his father and brother had become formal and strained, conducted primarily through legal representatives. The financial implications of the case began affecting royal operations in unexpected ways. Uncertainty about asset ownership and inheritance rights created complications for routine financial decisions and investment strategies. royal advisors found themselves seeking legal clearance for transactions that had previously been handled as routine matters. International diplomatic considerations added another layer of complexity to the proceedings. The case touched on constitutional questions about royal wealth and its relationship to state assets, creating sensitivities that extended beyond family financial matters to questions of national sovereignty and royal institutional authority. Public opinion remained sharply divided about the legal challenge. Supporters viewed Meghan's actions as ensuring her children's rightful inheritance and establishing important legal precedents. Critics argued that legal challenges to royal inheritance threatened institutional stability and represented inappropriate interference with centuries-old traditions. The discovery proceedings produced documents that revealed the true scale of royal personal wealth, figures that shocked even experienced royal watchers. Conservative estimates had significantly undervalued assets that had been accumulated and protected through sophisticated trust structures spanning multiple generations. As spring approached, both legal teams prepared for the substantive hearings that would determine the case's ultimate outcome. The discovery phase had provided Meghan's team with evidence supporting their core arguments while revealing vulnerabilities in royal legal protections that had never been tested in modern courts. Settlement discussions intensified as the royal family's legal advisors recognized the risks of continued public proceedings. However, Meghan's team maintained their position that any settlement must establish binding legal precedents that would protect the children's inheritance rights permanently, regardless of future family relationships or political considerations. The case had already achieved something unprecedented, forcing public examination of royal inheritance practices that had operated without external oversight for centuries. Regardless of the final outcome, the legal proceedings had permanently changed how royal wealth and inheritance rights would be understood and managed in the modern era. The breakthrough moment came during a tense negotiation session in a neutral location overlooking the Thames, far from prying media eyes. After months of legal maneuvering and increasingly public court proceedings, both sides had finally agreed to comprehensive settlement discussions that could reshape royal inheritance practices forever. Lord Christopher Ashworth, representing the royal family's interests, sat across from Meghan's legal team with documents that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. The royal family was prepared to acknowledge, for the first time in modern history, specific inheritance rights for royal descendants living outside traditional royal duties. The proposed settlement was extraordinary in its scope and implications. Archie and Lilibet would be established as beneficiaries of 3 major royal trusts, with inheritance rights that could not be revoked based on their parents' relationship with the royal family or their own future choices about royal involvement. Meghan reviewed the settlement terms carefully, understanding that this moment represented the culmination of a year-long legal strategy that had fundamentally altered the balance of power in royal inheritance matters. The financial value was significant, but the precedent being established was even more important for future royal descendants. The settlement included provisions that went beyond immediate financial considerations. The children would have access to historical family assets, including art collections and properties, that had never been available to royal descendants living outside Britain. These provisions established new categories of royal heritage rights that could affect other family members for generations. Prince Harry's role in the final negotiations had been carefully managed to preserve his relationship with both his nuclear family and his birth family. The settlement structure allowed him to support his children's interests while maintaining some diplomatic connection to royal institutions that remained important to him personally. The royal family's agreement to the settlement reflected their recognition that continued public court proceedings posed greater risks than accepting new precedents for royal inheritance. The discovery process had revealed financial information that they preferred to keep private, and expert legal opinions suggested that Meghan's case had strong prospects for success if pursued to completion. International. Legal experts hailed the settlement as a watershed moment in royal law and inheritance rights. The agreement established principles that could influence royal inheritance practices in other constitutional monarchies, particularly regarding descendants who chose careers and lives outside traditional royal frameworks. The financial structure of the settlement was designed to provide the children with substantial resources while maintaining appropriate oversight and management until they reached adulthood. Trust administrators would be appointed jointly, ensuring that both royal family interests and the children's independent interests were represented in financial decisions. Media reaction to the settlement announcement was intense but carefully managed through coordinated public relations strategies. Both sides presented the agreement as a positive resolution that protected children's interests while respecting royal institutional needs. The messaging emphasized family unity and forward-thinking approaches to modern royal challenges. Behind the scenes, the settlement had required complex negotiations with government officials and constitutional experts who needed to ensure that precedents being established didn't create unexpected complications for the monarchy's constitutional role. The agreement carefully distinguished between personal family wealth and assets connected to royal constitutional functions. The implementation of the settlement required establishing new legal structures that could operate across multiple jurisdictions while maintaining the privacy and security that royal financial management required. These structures would serve as models for future cases involving royal descendants with international lives and careers for other royal family members. The settlement created both opportunities and concerns. Those with their own children recognized that new precedents could benefit their descendants, but they also worried about implications for traditional royal financial control and institutional authority. The settlement's educational provisions were particularly innovative, establishing funds specifically for the children's education and development that could support their choices regardless of whether those choices aligned with traditional royal paths. This approach recognized the reality of modern royal lives that often combined heritage obligations with independent career development. International tax implications of the settlement required coordination between British and American authorities to ensure compliance with both countries' regulations regarding inherited wealth and trust structures. These arrangements established new frameworks for managing royal inheritance in an increasingly global financial environment. The timeline for implementing the settlement stretched over several years, with specific milestones and review periods that would allow adjustments as the children grew and developed their own preferences about their royal heritage and its role in their lives. Legal scholars immediately began analyzing the settlement's implications for inheritance law more broadly, particularly its approaches to balancing family institutional interests with individual descendant rights. The agreement provided new precedents for resolving conflicts between traditional inheritance practices and contemporary legal principles. The settlement also included provisions for regular communication and coordination between Meghan's family and royal institutions, establishing frameworks for maintaining relationships despite geographical distance and different lifestyle choices. These arrangements recognized that successful implementation would require ongoing cooperation rather than simply legal compliance. As news of the settlement spread internationally, constitutional experts in other monarchies began examining their own inheritance practices and considering whether similar reforms might be necessary to address modern realities of royal family life in an increasingly globalized world. The conclusion of formal legal proceedings marked the beginning of a new chapter in royal inheritance practices, one that balanced tradition with adaptation to contemporary family structures and international legal standards. For Meghan and her children, it represented the achievement of security and recognition that had seemed impossible just years earlier. 2 years after the groundbreaking settlement, the long-term implications of Meghan's legal victory continued to reshape royal inheritance practices in ways that few had anticipated. The precedents established through her case had influenced similar situations across European royal families, creating new standards for how modern monarchies balanced tradition with contemporary family realities. Archie and Lilibet, now beneficiaries of the restructured royal trusts, had access to resources and opportunities that reflected their unique position as royal descendants with American upbringing and global perspectives. The Educational Fund? Provisions had enabled experiences that combined awareness of their royal heritage with preparation for independent careers and lives. The trust management structure implemented through the settlement had proven successful in maintaining appropriate oversight while respecting the family's autonomy in California. Regular reports demonstrated responsible stewardship of inherited assets while supporting the children's development in ways that honored both their British royal heritage and their American citizenship. Prince Harry's relationship with his birth family had gradually stabilized around new norms established by the settlement. While formal interactions remained somewhat strained, the legal resolution had eliminated ongoing sources of conflict and created frameworks for cooperation on matters affecting the children's welfare and heritage education. The royal family's adaptation to increased transparency about inheritance matters had proven less disruptive than initially feared. The disclosure requirements established through the settlement had actually strengthened public confidence in royal financial management by demonstrating responsible oversight and clear separation between personal family wealth and constitutional state assets. International legal experts continued to study the case as a model for resolving complex inheritance disputes involving traditional institutions and modern family structures. Law schools worldwide use the settlement as a case study in international inheritance law, family dispute resolution, and institutional adaptation to contemporary legal standards. Other royal descendants had benefited from the precedents established through Meghan's legal challenge. Several cases involving lesser-known royal family members had been resolved more favorably than would have been possible under previous inheritance practices, demonstrating the broader impact of the legal reforms. The financial success of the new trust structures had exceeded expectations, with professional management and diversified investments generating returns that supported not only the immediate beneficiaries but also expanded educational and charitable initiatives that connected the children to their royal heritage through service and philanthropy. Meghan's own reputation had evolved from tabloid controversy to recognition as someone who had successfully navigated complex institutional challenges to protect her children's interests. Her approach was increasingly studied as an example of effective advocacy within traditional systems that required careful strategy and persistent effort rather than confrontation. The settlement's provisions for regular review and adjustment had proven valuable as the children grew and developed their own interests and capabilities. The flexible structure allowed adaptation to their changing needs while maintaining the security and opportunities that the legal challenge had been designed to achieve. Constitutional experts noted that the royal family's adaptation to new inheritance practices had actually strengthened the monarchy's modern relevance by demonstrating institutional flexibility and responsiveness to changing family structures and societal expectations. The communication protocols established through the settlement had facilitated positive interactions between the children and their British royal relatives, creating opportunities for relationship building that might not have existed under previous arrangements characterized by tension and uncertainty. Educational initiatives funded through the new trust structures had enabled both children to develop understanding of their heritage through visits to historical sites, meetings with constitutional experts, and participation in charitable activities that connected them to the royal family's tradition of public service. The international diplomatic implications of the settlement had been managed successfully, with other governments recognizing the agreement as an internal family matter that strengthened rather than threatened constitutional arrangements. The precedent had even influenced inheritance discussions in other constitutional monarchies facing similar modern challenges. Media coverage of the family had shifted from crisis-focused reporting to more substantive discussion of how modern royal families could balance tradition with contemporary realities. The successful resolution of the inheritance dispute had provided a framework for understanding that adaptation and preservation could be complementary rather than contradictory. The psychological benefits for all family members had been significant, with the resolution of legal uncertainty allowing focus on relationship building and positive development rather than defensive protection of positions. The children grew up with secure knowledge of their heritage and clear paths for engaging with it according to their own choices and interests. As the children approached school age, the educational provisions of the settlement enabled choices that honored both their American upbringing and their British royal heritage. They would have opportunities to experience both cultures fully while developing their own sense of identity and purpose. The legacy of Meghan's legal challenge extended beyond the immediate family to influence how inheritance rights were understood and protected for all royal descendants. The principle that heritage rights should be preserved regardless of family disagreements or lifestyle choices had become established precedent that would protect future generations. Looking forward, the framework established through the settlement provided a model for addressing similar challenges that other modern royal families might face as global mobility and diverse career choices became increasingly common among royal descendants. The balance achieved between tradition and adaptation offered lessons for institutional evolution in a rapidly changing world. The transformation from conflict to cooperation demonstrated that seemingly irreconcilable differences between traditional institutions and modern family needs could be resolved through careful legal strategy, patient negotiation, and mutual recognition that protecting children's interests required both preserving heritage and enabling individual choice.